Hi, my name is Rod, and I want to talk about something called expressions today. So, when people usually do input activities, they do so with the goal of learning words. They want to encounter new words, encounter new vocabulary, and what they mean by vocabulary is words, and they want to increase their word count essentially in their target language, in their vocabulary database, right? In their heads. So, they listen to something, they read something, and when they encounter new words, they might underline it and then they save it. They might add it into a flashcard program. They might take notes and then they review it later. So I think that there's actually a problem with that approach, that the basic unit of analysis for a language, the basic thing we're trying to get, it's not words. We're not trying to hoard words. We're trying to learn how to say ideas. So that's where the word expressions come in. Expressions means some form of language to express an idea. So let me give you a very concrete example. Suppose I'm drawing this, all right? What's that? That's supposed to represent idea. To say this idea in English, you use the word apple. In Spanish, it's manzana. Okay, so now you're probably like, okay, Rod, you basically just went in a circle. Isn't that just the same as words? Let me give you another example. Here is another idea. I'm going to draw it and make it look nice. All right. That's supposed to be feathers right there, by the way. That, in English, we'll call it love. For example, love is an important part of life. Love is pain, for example, right? Okay, whatever you want. How would you say that in Spanish? And the answer I propose is this: el amor. Okay, so what's going on there? You notice, first of all, it's not a word. It's not a singular word. It's a word with a grammatical element in front of it, right? And that, if you want to say it kind of more in a general fashion, it's two words, but it's an article and then a noun. All right. And I don't want to overanalyze it, but basically it's not a word. That's my point, right? That to say this idea in Spanish, you have to say el amor, right? Why? Because think of if you put it in a sentence, like love is important in life, like the example I just gave you earlier, right? El amor es importante en la vida, right? You wouldn't say amor es importante en la vida. If you say it that way, it sounds kind of straight. It sounds off. It sounds, you could say it's grammatically off. You could say it's not natural. You could attribute it to many things, but it's off, right? El amor es importante en la vida. Okay. Entonces, so what does that mean? That means that if you're learning just words and you're capturing just words, you're going to be missing stuff. Let me give you another example. Let's take the word hacer. All right. Suppose we're A1 again, maybe A2, depending on the class you're taking. And you're learning hacer. You're reading a text, and the text says, tienes que hacer la tarea todos los días. Tienes que hacer la tarea todos los días. Bueno. Okay, so you have that sentence, and you're like, okay, I'm reading it. Tienes que hacer la tarea todos los días. Oh, I don't know what hacer means. Right? And you write that down, you look it up, like, oh, it means to do. Okay? And you're actually missing the expression itself. You're missing the idea, which is actually hacer la tarea, right? To do homework. You might look it up. It might say in the dictionary to do, to make. Okay, right? There's two meanings there. So it means to do or to make. Okay. For example, you could use it to say to make food. Hacer la comida, right? To make food for like a dinner or something. Okay. Now, if you're just thinking about it in terms of words, and you encounter, I don't know, maybe you want to say this idea. You ready? There's a person. He's confused. That's a confused face right there. And he has questions, so he's asking a question. How would you say ask a question in Spanish? Now, you can take it word per word and then look it up in the dictionary and say, okay, ask a question. Ask is preguntar. Is una pregunta, right? So then you put it together, preguntar una pregunta. You're like, yay, I learned it. So learn how to say, ask a question, but you'd be wrong. But why? Because to say the idea, this idea again, this image again, right? Just like the image of the apple, just like the image of love, to say that in Spanish, what would it be? It would be hacer una pregunta. Así, right? Just like that. So what's the point here? The point here is that expressions are better than words. They're the actual basic unit of analysis, right? If you're breaking down a language, you're looking for ideas, right? So what's an expression? An expression is an idea, right? And think of like an image. So you're imagining something. That's supposed to be like a thought cloud. Or maybe I'll just put this like an exclamation point for an idea, right? They're images, okay? And those images are then expressed a certain way, right? You use language to convey them in a certain way. And that language may be Spanish, it might be whatever. And this is important because in Spanish, yeah, you might get, it's easier to get like word to word translation in Spanish, but if you start learning, especially Eastern languages like Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Cambodian, Vietnamese, etc., right? You're not going to get that word per word translation. In Spanish, the word per word translation is like, okay, most of the time you can do things word per word, and there are exceptions, right? Except this. In Eastern languages, if you do that from, at least from an English native speaker perspective, those exceptions aren't exceptions. They're the rules. And the exception is when you actually get a word per word translation. That's the difference. Think about words. You want to think about expressions. You want to think about the idea first and how to express the idea. Okay, so let's put this in action. I have a bilingual text here and we're going to examine it. I like using bilingual text because it's easier to show ideas that way, even though, remember what I said earlier, that the basis of it is ideas, which are more like images or concepts, right? We're not looking at language per se, and language forms are the ways to express the idea. So we have a text here: me despierto a las 7 de la mañana todos los días. Lo primero que hago es tomar un café para despertarme bien. Luego me ducho y me visto para ir a trabajar. All right, so what's going on here? If you're B1, you probably understand every single word here or close to it. If you're intermediate, you probably understand every single word in this passage, and it's not like from a comprehension perspective, it's not difficult for you. But what is difficult for you? If I were to ask you to translate on the right-hand side, say those ideas in Spanish, you probably wouldn't be able to in a way that's natural and that's quick. All right, so let's take an example here. Every day. Okay. And think about that. Like, can you say every day in this sort of context? Like, I wake up every day, I go to school every day, I go to work every day, etc., etc. Would you be able to say that, right? And if the answer is no, like you're practicing, right? You say, okay, me levanto todos los días, trabajo todos los días, desayuno todos los días. If you can't say that in a sentence, then you actually, you know it passively, but you don't know it actively. And those are two different things, right? You can't express that idea of every day. So in this case, you would have learned something new, right? You would have found a gap. All right, I call it a gap, an expressive gap. Okay, I wake up. How would you say that? Right here, you have me despierto. Me despierto. See? And notice I'm not worrying about things like, why is it me despierto and not yo despierto, right? I'm not worrying about the grammar. I know it's reflexive, and you can read about grammatical explanations and get a general sense of things so you don't like wonder too much. But I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about why it's a certain way. I just know that if I want to say I wake up, specifically, me despierto. If I want to say 7 in the morning or at 7 in the morning, a las 7 de la mañana, and I won't worry about why is it de la mañana and not en la mañana or sobre la mañana or whatever the case may be, I just think in the morning de la mañana. Okay? So here we have already kind of 3 expressions. All right. And you could play around with expressions. You could be like, okay, a las 7 de la mañana. How would I say, for example, 9 in the morning? A las 9 de la mañana, right? A la 1 de la mañana. Something like that. So you can substitute it and you can play around with it. And that kind of shows your mastery of these things. Okay. Let me zoom in a little bit more. I can't. I think I'm at max zoom. All right. Let me clear this though. Okay, so that's expressions. That's how you kind of deal with that. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for ideas and how to say them. Looking for, Stephen Krashen calls them messages as well. You're looking for messages and how to say them, right? You're not looking for words. You get rid of words. We want to get rid of vocabulary out of our perspective. Not get rid of it completely, but it will be helpful not to be stuck on words, right? Here's another one. Okay. What's important here is that you have this test of like, okay, can I say it if I were put on the spot? Can I say that idea? And if you can't say it, that means it's a gap. You're learning something new, even at the B1 level. Just because you can understand it, you want to put the test to yourself, right? You want to test yourself and be like, hey, can I say I shower? Can I say I get dressed? Can I say I have a coffee? And even at B2 comprehension levels, you'd be surprised. Some of you are probably like, oh my God, if someone asked me to say get dressed, I'm actually not sure how to say that. Or how to say wake up, like literally wake up, not get up, but wake up, right? I might not know how to say that. And some of you are probably experiencing that, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, it doesn't diminish your listening ability, right? Doesn't diminish your reading and your comprehension. You're still badass. Just not in speaking. That's all. So you have to like focus on these things, right? And I was stuck at intermediate for a while, and even then, I was struggling. I was like, oh my God, like it's embarrassing. I can't say basic things. I understand when people say it, but when I have to say it myself, I can't say basic things. And why do I have a B2 comprehension but speaking at A1? It's okay, right? So there you go. Hope that helps.